data is not input or it's manipulated by someone.
Okay, now I would consider that to be less of a project risk and more of an operational risk. Because your leakage of real credit card information will probably be happening after you went into production, right? In testing, what you'll try to do is test for, are we going to have a leakage like that, right? But yeah, it's a project risk would be specifically something that could happen during the project, right? Operational risk would be something that would happen after you went into production. So, leakage of private information is definitely a significant security risk for that system. Do you have another one?
It is a performance risk. If the video usage is on a low speed here, where there are two types of speed, right? 50 kbps and the 120 kbps. So actually the risk is the video usage. If you are trying to watch the video which has a buffering, or due to buffering we are not able to view it properly.
Now, would you, see, I'm not sure I would say that that's a project risk, it's really more of a quality risk, because you can test for that. You could run a test, like set up a kiosk as a low-speed kiosk, and then run a test of what happens if I try to download videos. Does it buffer, does it work properly? Yeah, remember the distinction between a project risk and a quality risk is what you run a test for. If you run a test for it, then it's probably a quality risk. Okay. But test-related project risk is something that would affect your ability to actually carry out the testing. So, like I don't have sufficient environments. You mentioned power failure when we were talking. That definitely is an example of a test-related project risk, right? I could have power failure during test execution, and if it were long enough, it would actually, have a significant interruption on my ability to carry out tests. So, that's something that you might have a mitigation plan for, having UPS, uninterruptible power supplies in your test environment. All right, so again, just remember, project risk is something that could happen that would affect your ability to carry out your project, in this case the testing, versus a quality risk, which is something that would affect the quality of the system. So again, the way to separate them is, if you could run a test, then it's a quality risk. If you can't test for it, then it's a project risk, probably. Or it might be an operational risk. An operational risk is something that affects the operation of the system post-release. Okay? Now, as a test manager, what you want to do with project risks is identify the project risks, test-related project risks, put contingency and mitigation in place for the risks that are significant. Some organizations use this idea of a top 10 list, where they just look at the top 10 project risks, and you can use that approach if you want. You want to avoid getting into a situation where you have 10 pages of risks and mitigations in the end of your test plan, and you spend more effort on mitigation and contingency defining those than you do on the actual testing. Okay? But focus on the most important ones and be ready to deal with those. The rest of them, just accept them. Right? As I said, we do this every day. We accept the risk every day as part of life. You're not going to be able to eliminate it. All you can do is manage the most important ones. Black is everything else. Okay? And what that means effectively is we haven't run all the tests for this risk yet. We are not aware of any defects related to this risk, nor have any of the tests that we have run failed, but there are still tests to run. Okay. Make sense to everybody? Now, when you start your test execution off, the pie chart is completely black, right? Because you haven't run any testing. So they're all classified as unknown, effectively. We don't know what the status is. Now, you start to run your tests, assuming that you're doing risk-based testing, we're going to run the tests that are more likely to fail first, right? Yeah, the likelihood is part of the risk calculation. Which means that your red wedge is going to grow faster than your green wedge at first. It should. You're running the test in risk order. Red wedge starts to drive out the black wedge. Now, you get about to the middle of the project, and what should happen there is bugs that you found start to get fixed. And so things are migrating from the red wedge into the green wedge. And also, some cases, you end up testing risks out, and you don't find any bugs, and so things migrate directly from the black wedge to the green wedge. So the green wedge starts to grow. Okay? You get towards the end of the project, you should be looking at something like this. Mostly green, a little bit of black, a little bit of red. Okay? Now, that black and red, that's your residual quality risk. Remember I said this morning I was going to show you how you could draw a picture of this, and I didn't mean a figurative picture, I meant an actual picture, a meaningful picture. That's it. 95% of the risks have been mitigated. Okay. And you can even set this up, and if you download the example of this from the website, you can see that it does. You can set this up so that it's risk weighted. So the amount of area in the wedge associated with a risk is based on the risk priority number. The higher the risk, the more area it accounts for. So you could say that the black area and the red area actually are a representation of the residual level of risk across all the remaining risks. It's not just a count, it's risk weighted. Now, of course, what we like is we get to the last planned day of project execution and magically we have a green pie. Yeah, that's what we would like. Is that going to happen? Probably not. So what's probably going to happen is that there's going to need to be a conversation about what's in the black wedge, what's in the red wedge. Right? What are the residual risks specifically? This is a picture that represents the residual risk, but what exactly are those residual risks? What we do is create 3 reports. A green list, a red list, and a black list. Now, in reality, you're not going to need to create a green list because good news requires no explanation, right? You're not going to get grilled as a tester when you give people good news. Now, what requires explanation is bad news. So the black list, the red list, those are what you're going to have to go through. What tests remain to be run, what tests failed, what known bugs are there, is management comfortable with those risks remaining unmitigated to some extent. And if they are comfortable with that, then they have made a risk-aware release decision. Right? They have accepted the risk. Notice that at this point, it's not like they can come back to you and say, "Oh, you didn't tell me you hadn't tested that." Yeah, I did. That was in the black list. Or, "Oh, I didn't know that that was broken." Yeah, you did. That was in the red list. Right? So you've given them status. And notice that you've given them status in terms of what the stakeholders collectively told you they were worried about. See, all too often we make the mistake as testers and test managers, we report in terms of bug counts and test case counts. Say things like, well, we have 937 tests, and we run 920 of those tests, and 915 of them pass. And then, management's looking at you like, huh? And then you go, and we found 516 defects, and of those, 475 defects have been fixed, and they passed the confirmation test. We have about 35 defects left open, and they're looking at you like, huh? And then they say, is that good? Because they want it to be good, right? So they're always going, oh, is that good? And then what do you say? You probably say, well, you got to, kind of depends. You got to look at the test and fails. You got to look at competitive budgets. And they're just like, what does this mean? What is this person telling me, right? You can see their eyes going around in circles like some kind of cartoon. You're halfway through the report, you're totally confused, okay? Total disconnect of the message, right? You're just like talking right past them. Message not delivered, okay? And this is a problem because one of the major objectives of testing is to give stakeholders information so that they can make informed decisions. And if you're sitting in project status meetings talking past your stakeholders, you're failing. But this is what they told you they were worried about, right? So now you're coming back and going, okay, that stuff that we said that we were going to test, the stuff that we agreed was what we were worried about, here's the results. Here's what we found. See? So it's not like they're going to not understand that, because after all, you're talking their language. They literally told you what they were worried about. Now you're telling them what the status is. See what I mean? I'm not saying don't say anything about your test case counts and your bug counts, but that information is really inscrutable to the average non-tester. You want to talk more about stuff people can relate to. And that's this risk-based results reporting. They can relate to that because, after all,